You Can Mentor is a podcast about the power of building relationships with kids from hard places in the name of Jesus. Every episode will help you overcome common mentoring obstacles and give you the confidence you need to invest in the lives of others. You Can Mentor.
Hey guys, today's episode is an interview with Korey Dean, the father of Christian hip hop himself, or at least one of the fathers. I think you're going to enjoy today's episode. We talked about the school to prison pipeline and the reality of what Black boys face in our culture and day today. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please let us know about it by rating the podcast, sharing it with someone you know. And if you're on YouTube, click that subscribe button. Thanks. Welcome back to the You Can Mentor podcast. My name is Steven, and I have a very special guest today coming from Minneapolis. This is Korey Dean. Mr. Dean, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I'm good. Now, Cross, you are a hip hop recording artist. Tell us a little bit about your history and how long you've been an artist for.
Yeah, so I've been an artist for about, roughly over 25 years. I'm a pioneer of Christian hip hop, so that dates me, way. But it's a good thing because, I was a part of, a lot of the groundbreaking things back when they had Holy Hip Hop Music Awards in Atlanta, with Christopher Play Martin from the movie House Party, who's one of my good friends. He featured me in a documentary called Holy Hip Hop, the Movement, and that came out when we had, DVDs.
Some people don't even know what a DVD is anymore.
Yeah, I know, right? So, that's kind of how far the music goes back. But yeah, I'm a founder and CEO of One Way Entertainment, which is a Christian hip hop record label. We have 7 artists that are on our record label. We've been grinding for a minute. We've had success in that. I've been blessed to be a Grammy-nominated artist. And then I also have 3 children who are prolific Christian hip-hop artists. So for us, it's like the first family of Christian hip-hop. We're all immersed in it. My wife is immersed in it. She received a Grammy nomination when I did because she was part of that same project. She does spoken word. So, it's just a family of artists, moving, towards Jesus Christ, man, impacting culture, more specifically urban culture, and just kind of, reestablishing and setting a precedence for urban inspirational content, because as you well know, and as many other mentors know around the country who work in urban communities, there's so many negative depictions in urban culture when it comes to music, video, and film. And so we're just, we've been working hard, in relationship to mentoring, but we've, been spiritually impacting people through our music on the other side. And we've kind of brought all of that together.
Yeah, I love it. Well, and that's how I connected to you. I saw that you were on a list of Black entrepreneurs that people should watch out for. Obviously, I'm having you on this podcast not because of Christian rap, but because of mentoring. But at the same time, that influences how you mentor and how you reach kids. And so I'm excited to talk about all of that, though. And the fact that you're older than Rapzilla and all the other things that kind of on, I guess, the new lingo for finding Christian rap artists. I know a guy at Dallas Baptist University. He was a student when I was a college pastor. His name was Street Hymns. And he's been doing a lot of Christian rap battles and stuff. And it's just blowing people away because, that kind of culture is very vulgar and he's just rapping about the Bible. And it'll kind of catch you off guard when you meet people within the Christian hip hop scene. But yeah, who is your favorite artist currently that's kind of just hitting their stride right now? As you're kind of the grandfather of Christian hip hop, who's the guy coming up right now people should watch out for?
Oh my goodness, that's a tough question because that's such a biased question. Not a biased question, but I would provide a biased answer because I really, and this is just my honest opinion, I think that my 2 children are. I think my son Tytist, he's a basketball player at Liberty University, but he's also a prolific artist, and my daughter CELENA, they're both in college, and you mentioned the term hitting their stride. That's exactly where they are at in their careers right now, because they both have released 2 albums individually, and then they just released an album collectively. So they're artists in their own right, but when they come together, they form a group which is called Sis and Lil Bro. And I'm excited about what they're doing and the concerts that they're having. They're both are really impacting the culture around them on campus. So they're doing their thing from that perspective, and I'm looking forward to the projects that they have coming out. Tytist, he recently, I say recently, I'm talking about this week, just released a new music video called Enough Said. It's a really fascinating video. It's very futuristic. It's a lot of digital effects and special effects, and it depicts him being on earth and, talking to God and going to heaven and the gates opening and he having this experience and then him being sent back to earth to finish the work that he's done. I mean, it's just,
Wow.
It's crazy. So I'm excited about those 2 kids, man.
Man, I'm excited too. I'm going to link to them in the show notes so our listeners can check them out. So Tytist and CELENA.
Yes, I am Tytist and I am CELENA on their
okay. Come on, man. That's awesome. Well, Mr. Dean, the reason I have you on the podcast today is to talk about another organization that you founded, the Man Up Club. So I'd love if you shared a little bit about the story behind you starting this mentoring organization.
Yeah, so the Man Up Club is a mentor leadership organization for young Black males between the ages of 12 and 24. We mentor young men in 4 areas, which is life skills, social skills, academic discipline, and civic responsibility. And we have 3 main goals within the organization, and that's to, get young Black males to graduate from high school, keep them out of the prison pipeline, and to get them to go on to either college or have a trade after high school. So I started the organization back in 2012. I was a student advocate for about 400 African American students at a local school in the Twin Cities, and just assessed the needs of the kids basically, and found out that it was young Black males that faced a multitude of challenges. And so I wanted to put something in place that would, help them, navigate some of those social systems, and in the classroom and build rapport with administrations and teachers and things like that, just so that they could, have opportunity. And a lot of these young men were not the ones who were, engaged in extracurricular activities such as sports after school and things like that. These were the kids who was kind of just caught between the cracks of, not necessarily being, very athletic and all of that, and then just going to school and kind of going home, but not really going home after school, just hanging out and getting into all kind of stuff. So we wanted to impact those guys. And, we looked at graduation rates here and they were subpar. We didn't want to, we wanted to put something in place that would bring them up and raise that graduation rate, man. And the other piece is that, a lot of those young men, when they would get into altercations at school, they would immediately be referred to, the police and arrested. And then it became a civic issue and they would have, now they would have a record, that would follow them the rest of their lives. And so we're talking about some systemic issues that just impacted young Black males from the onset. So I designed the Man Up Club as an after school program, just as a student advocate, and had young men wear these suits once a week, which changed their perception and how the teachers approached them and dealt with them and the administration and what have you. And it's amazing what, when you put a suit on a young man, what that would do as far as how he's perceived. We'd like to believe that we can accept people for who they are and, at face value or what have you, and not judge a book by its cover. But, the reality is we always do. And so we need to be able to teach our young men, how to navigate the system as it is and not how we think the system should be. I think that's one of the things that as mentors, we run a mistake. We know that things are supposed to be equal, but in reality, we know that things are not equal. And I just believe that if you're really going to service a young man and get him ready for survival, then you need to teach him the truth of what they're facing. And so, that was, kind of one of the core things about the Man Up Club is that, we didn't teach from a perspective of what if, we taught from the perspective of the reality. What is the reality? Yeah. And the reality is that the playing field is not fair and that we need to get these young men equipped to play on a playing field that's not fair so that they can survive regardless of what the circumstances are. So you fast forward to 2015, we developed it in the Man Up Club into a nonprofit organization, 501c3, and we did that because we wanted to be able to partner with other schools, and then church and local businesses, as well as other nonprofit organizations. So we've been going strong for, I think we're going into our 6th year now as a nonprofit organization. And we have several chapters around the city and operating cohorts where we mentor 10 to 15 young men at a time. And, so many different things that are a part of our program. Outside of just what we're mentoring young guys, we have volunteers that tutor our young men. We go on field trips and all sorts of things. And then we have an annual festival that we do called God Flow, which is a pretty big festival in the community. We do trauma healing circles and all sorts of things, man, that we do to get these young men ready for life.
Come on. Well, I love it. And I mean, you just mentioned so much.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And I love just your heart to focus. Just based off of your advocacy in the school of saying, hey, this particular population of students has more obstacles, more challenges than others. Like the playing field is not fair for these kids. So how can I engage and equip them to make it? And now you mentioned something, the prison pipeline.
Yeah.
I don't know if our listeners know what the prison pipeline is. Could you explain that?
Well, yeah, it's basically ways in which, and systemic ways in which young men are kind of preempted for prison, to get prepared for prison, and that can come in several different ways. And, as far as like you add the graduation rate and you add living in poverty, to some of these things. And for example, even in the schools that I worked in as a student advocate, you had a school that was, it's a predominantly white school, but you're talking about 2,000 students and you got about 400 to 500 who are African American. And these young men would be getting put out of class and they would go to the detention room. So if you got a school that's predominantly a white school, and then you have a detention center, but the detention center is filled with African American kids, then you got to understand you're basically preparing them to go to prison because of how it's structured. Then you have these schools who kind of operate kind of like prisons, where you got kids who come in, they come through metal detectors. When they go in the classroom, the door locks behind them to the classroom as if it was, a prison door, what have you, and then you have these rules and regulations that are designed and set up for failure. It's not set up for success. It's not set up to be redemptive. Is set up to be for consequences and punishment or what have you. And so there's just so many systemic things that are in place that kind of softens the kids' minds and get them comfortable with it, and it kind of massages them into this psychological thought process that, well, maybe prison isn't so bad. It's not quite a huge leap or transition from being free to being incarcerated, because there's so many similarities. So that, when kids get caught up and they make this transition, unfortunately, from living in a free society to confined in a prison, that has a psychological effect on these kids. And so, that's just one aspect of what I refer to as this, this prison pipeline. And then you look at, the murder rate of African Americans murdering each other and kids murdering each other. And then, being fatherless. There's so many layers to this thing, but that's what I refer to when I talk about the prison pipeline. All of these variables in life that kind of squeezes you down and funnels you down and closes the opportunity gap to the point where, based on your situation and circumstance and your past and your experiences, it kind of funnels you into this system. And that system is incarceration. That system is prison, basically. And once you're caught up in it, you get a record or what have you, that's where it really gets crazy, because it's hard to get out of it. Obviously, you can get out of it. Let's be clear about that. You can get out of it. but it becomes extremely difficult once a young man has a felony, and then, you got to try to reintegrate them back into society and try to, navigate, getting them a job or housing. And it's just a big web.
Mhm. Well, and it sounds like, I mean, gosh, just in your formative years, anywhere, any direction a Black kid looks, there are images and symbols and environments that are preparing you and conditioning you to define yourself a certain way.
Absolutely.
And then that leads to uh, wrong beliefs. And then if you face incrimination, prosecution, and imprisonment, then those things that were defining you, now the system defines you and stays with you the rest of your life. And so it's like, no matter what, especially in your formative years, how important that is. And I love what you said is like all of those things in the school, the metal detectors, the locking doors. How much does that influence the way teachers view kids and view them as suspect? And so when you say sending your boys to school with suits on is trying to redefine how people would look at them, I think that's very powerful to I guess challenge the assumptions that are being made about who a Black boy is within.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with basically challenging the assumption. That's like very critical, because we do assume, and we do have prejudices, and racism does exist. It's alive and well, and there's a lot of people in positions of power who hold these thoughts and who hold these perspectives. So the thing is, we're in a war. That's just that simple. And we need to be able to put our kids in, number one, we need to put parameters around them and give them advice, and coach them in situations and give them tools. And the suit is nothing more than a tool, giving them tools to help navigate the system, and give them the best chance at success from the onset. That's the critical piece, is from the onset. It's unfortunate that it's that way in America, but the reality is the reality. And I can take two Black boys, and I can let one dress himself however he wants to dress according to the culture under which he lives. And I can take another young and give him the knowledge that I have, and give him the resources that I have, which might happen to be a suit, and put it on them. They can have the same scholastic aptitude. They can come from the same environment, or what have you. But if you present those two boys together to the same people, oftentimes, and more times than not, it is going to be the young man that is in a suit who's going to receive the benefit of the doubt. And he's going to be the one that typically people would feel more comfortable. And this is not just, the young Black man, the white people feeling comfortable with the young Black man. This is all people being comfortable with the young Black man that has the suit on. And it's just a sad reality that we have to take these kinds of steps in order to, give our kids an opportunity just to be seen as normal. That's the key. Is how just to be seen, because there are so many young men who operate in this world as themselves, as their God-given selves, with whatever resources they have or lack thereof. But the reality is they're not seen. Mm-hmm. And so when you walk in a society and live in a society and dwell in a society under which you feel devalued and you're not seen, then you kind of act out, and you start to do things that are uncharacteristic of your natural behavior.
Wow. I feel like we could keep talking about this, because the thing that's in my head right now is mentoring. We help kids cope with the reality, the reality that they're in. And we don't necessarily focus on changing the reality, the situation that, how you put it, the systemic issues. Like I would love to be able to address those things. It's very difficult to figure out how to do that. And so we just focus on coping strategies for kids and figuring out, okay, how do we do both? How do we change the system and not just focus on coping with the reality and fitting in and trying to become normative within the system of how it is. I don't know the answer, but I feel like we have to do both of those. But I mean, obviously, you're in Minneapolis. I mean, George Floyd was murdered in your city, and you guys were. I mean, you were leading concerts. I saw just at where he was killed, and you obviously you have a lot of experience in this, and I don't know who brought you up, who mentored you, who taught you to cope with the realities. I don't know if you could go into that, if you have stories of mentors that helped you engage in coping with the realities of our nation.
Well, yeah, I have mentors. So unfortunately, I never met my father, but my father was a very educated man. He was a pastor. He traveled the world. He had his doctorate and his PhD. We just didn't have a relationship, and unfortunately, I never met him, and he passed away when I was playing college football. But I was fortunate enough in my journey to meet a couple of gentlemen who were very influential and played instrumental roles in my life as to, how I developed and the paths that I took and how I made my decisions and what have you. And that was critical. One gentleman was named Mr. whom I met in high school, who was a white male, and he lived totally different than I did. And, he just approached me. I was a blue chip athlete in the state of Missouri as a football player, one of their top prospects. And he had approached me after a football game and just simply said, "Hey, I'll cut you a deal." He says, do you plan on going to college? My answer was no. He says, "Hey, I'll make you a deal. If you come to my house every day after school, after practice, I'll tutor you. And I promise to get you, some offers to college, whether they're academic or athletic." And so for me, that was enticing. And I took the deal. But the key was me taking the deal, me seeing the value in what he had to offer me, and I got it. I latched onto it and I didn't let it go. And so I went to his house every day after school and I studied. I studied hard, and, his life was completely different from mine. His family was completely different from mine. Their culture was completely different from mine. So, that's to say, regardless of, what the differences are, we still have to make choices if we really, want to change our future. Now, I could have easily just said, nah, I don't want to deal with the white people, or no, I don't want to make the commitment to studying every day. I want to, kick it with my friends. All of these things were there, but, and you still had racism, but I had to make the decision to be an individual as opposed to just flowing with the crowd. And long story short, I stuck with it. He got me multiple scholarships to different schools around the country. I ended up going to college. I ended up making the dean's list. I ended up breaking school records in football and, going on and, to do some important things that and see some opportunities that I never would have been able to seize as a result of him speaking into my life. But the thing was, I trusted him. Because I looked at his life and what he had. His kids didn't watch television. They, all of his kids went to Ivy League colleges, and they didn't look at me as this little poor black kid. They just looked at me as a person who had some potential, and they wanted to, basically help make my life better. So he invested in me, and he never invested money. He invested his time, which was the most valuable asset. And then, once I went to college, I had another mentor that came into my life, and he was a black man. He was the dean of the business school. His name was Frank McKinney. And so, he helped me at my next stage in my life as far as stepping into manhood and becoming a man and, giving me responsibilities. And he was the first person who had ever co-signed for me to get a car. And that was huge because, I had people in my family who wouldn't dare do that, and, for him to have A1 credit, but to put his name on the line for me, that meant something to me. And so I valued him to the point where I never wanted to let him down. And so, he simply said to me, he says, "Hey," and I had never heard anybody say this to me, even as I was growing up and growing up poor and struggling with bills and things like that. He said to me, "If you ever feel like you're going to get in a situation where you're not going to be able to make this payment, you make sure you let me know right away. I've never heard those words before from anybody, and that hit me differently. And so it motivated me to put myself in a position to make those payments. And even if I was in a situation where I wanted to compromise those payments, because as teenagers and young people, we want to do that, I didn't do it because I didn't want him to have to go in his pocket and do more for me. But it's just these opportunities where people that they give us that we have to make good on. And so for me, I recognize that having those two mentors in my life really kind of shaped, me today, and how we, first of all, even started the Man Up Club and how we run it, and it's just kind of based on my childhood of what people have done for me.
I love it. And I hear so much, reading about your program, how much they influenced you to do what you're doing, and to see your mentoring being the fruit of their investment in you, spending time, which is the primary investment. And I believe that the greatest investment we can make is in people, but the greatest asset we have is time. So I totally agree with you there. And for mentors who try to circumvent and build relationship through finances, they're missing out on a lot that they can give just through their presence. And,
Absolutely.
And recognizing that, even just for me, I know there are a ton of mentors, if I'm honest, that are out there who are white and think that it's best for them to be a white mentor to a black kid, and don't even think about a black mentor for a black kid. And other mentors who think, I don't have everything that this kid needs. I can't relate it with his experience and our differences. And they feel, I guess, inferior or incapable of providing the mentorship that a kid needs. But to hear you say that you took a guy up on the value that he was giving you and turned his investment into, exponential. You turned it exponential in giving away everything that he's given you to the kids that you're serving now. I think that's a great encouragement for any mentor of a kid who feels like they can't relate.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally understand where you're coming from. A lot of them feel disconnected, but I think that the key is just understanding what it is that you do have to offer. Obviously, we're all human beings, and this is a humanitarian issue. And the investment is you're investing into human capital. So we have much more in common, than we think. Race is just one aspect of it. It's a very small part of the equation. And yeah, we have different experiences. But the truth be told, we have a lot of similar experiences. The only difference is that we just simply do not allow each other to truly understand what our individual experiences are because of the color of our skin. We allow that to be this type of barrier, that exists when it really shouldn't exist in the grand scheme of things and what we can get accomplished. You take that small percentage of racism that exists in the minds of people. That's a very small percentage of this layer that keeps the majority of what you have to offer somebody at bay. And so if we can just break that little thin line of racism, then we can open the floodgates to human interaction and human growth. That's how I look at it.
Wow, that's good. One of your program focuses you mentioned was civic responsibility. And
Yes.
I haven't heard of very many organizations focusing on that. Can you unpack just kind of the reason y'all value that so much?
Yeah. It's a big component. And, you talk about development of young people, and, naturally you want to develop them socially, and you want to develop them emotionally, and you want to develop them academically. And that's all focused on the person from an inward perspective of you pouring into them. But I think we should mentor kids from a holistic perspective and allow them to be able to pour out of themselves into society, because that's where we live. And to let them understand that they have something to offer the culture, they have something to offer society, the surroundings under which they live, and that they have a responsibility in it, and that they're not just existing. I think that's part of the problem, is that young people are born into this world and they're kind of, often told to be seen and not heard, which kind of puts them, in a category or isolates them. And confines them and doesn't allow them to operate at their full capacity. But more importantly, it doesn't allow them to even understand their value in the grand scheme of things in this system called America and the world that they live in. And so they need to be able to give back as a contributor. So when we talk about civic responsibility, there's a responsibility that young people have to their community that they live in. They have a responsibility to their church. They have a responsibility to their neighborhood. They have a responsibility to the person who owns the local grocery store, to the organizations and businesses that are around them, because they're utilizing these resources. These are resources that they have to utilize in order for them to meet their daily wants and daily needs. And so there's a responsibility that comes with that. And so we want our kids to be able to give back, So for example, even with, the George Floyd situation, during that murder, I mean, there were emotions that were high. Young kids were angry. They were mad. They were upset. But the thing is, as a mentor, we needed to be able to stress to them that that's not the only responsibility that they have, is just to feel those emotions. They have a responsibility to be a part of their community, to help move it forward and to help the community heal. And so we give them that civic responsibility. If there's looting and there's fires and things like that, then we have a civic responsibility to help clean up and restore our community. Our young men have a civic responsibility to talk and meet with the chief of police and talk with his department on how we can build relationships between young Black men and the police department outside of them coming to make an arrest. There's a civic responsibility that needs to be held there, and even giving young people a voice, to speak to their city council about what's going on in their community, or even and oftentimes what you'll find is young people, we typically just have the main form of civic responsibility that we want to give our young kids is when it's consequential in regards to, say, for example, community service, what have you. That's not the only form of civic responsibility that our kids should engage in. And they should understand civic responsibility outside of consequences, but just of being of goodwill and being a good humanitarian and being a person of goodwill, period, bottom line.
So you're getting back to the system. How the system works is when you're punished, that's when you need to serve the community.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy. No. It gives a wrong perspective of what it looks like to be a citizen.
Well, then community service just looks like punishment. Because you've never taught a kid the value of serving this community prior to getting in trouble.
Yeah.
It's no different than, a person having a house and they got to maintain that house. If you're living in the community, you got to cut the grass, you got to shovel the snow, that's part of civic responsibility. Now we teach that as parents to kids and giving them chores, but once again, chores to some kids seem like it's consequences, And that's a piece that starts at home. And so for us in the Man Up Club, we want to get out. We want to meet people. We want to talk to people. I even make young men, carry the elderly's groceries. I mean, we keep it that simple. It's like, hey, these are responsibilities that you have to have.
Mm-hmm. I love it. How many mentors do you feel like join the Man Up Club and it just awakens that kind of responsibility as, man, I'm a man and I'm supposed to be courageous, responsible, because I feel like that kind of activates some stuff in me just as you're talking.
Yeah. I mean, for us, we look for great mentors, and we want people to be able to pour into the lives of our kids. And the thing is, we want them to be able to see the value, in being able to do that. And it's not just kids that need to feel like that they have something to offer. From a mentor standpoint, I think, that's critical. I don't know of too many things that are more important than being a mentor, because it doesn't really matter what you accumulate as an individual. Mm-hmm. If you don't have the heart to connect with other people, to share it or to build them up, You know, to me, I think you really don't understand the full value of what you've been given. And so for me, it's about being a good steward over what I have. And that's not just material things. You know, there's a lot to be offered, and to be able to pay what we call pay it forward, to be able to make these deposits and investments. And the thing is, I think the unfortunate reality for mentors is that we get discouraged because we don't see the instant gratification of of the investments that we're making. But truth be told, you got to understand the power under which anytime that you're depositing something good in a person, it's going to develop. It has to develop. And it's a matter of time. And so I just think that, you know, being able to speak into mentors' lives and to let them know that what they have is gold. You know, the knowledge, the resources, the guidance, the strength, the affirmations, the character, all of these things that can be deposited, the comfort, the safety net that you can provide somebody else. Human personal interaction is invaluable.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. Last question. Is there an issue that you guys recently addressed or talked about in y'all's groups? I know you guys do group mentoring where you have kind of community centers where the boys come and they hear a teaching and you guys have a group discussion. Is there anything that y'all have discussed recently or that you've addressed in a story of kids overcoming that reality that they're facing, that obstacle?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll give you one that we recently discussed just many hours ago, which was last night. You know, I simply posed the question to the young men. It was something. Let me preface this first. So a lot of times we think mentoring requires super deep discussions, and we have to have this big recipe for it. And what I've recognized over the course of doing mentorship and working with young people is you don't. I think what they respect is you being direct and to the point, because they don't get that a lot. They get a lot of hustle, people coming at them from different angles, trying to either take things or get things or what have you. And so, you know, we kind of just keep it real, raw, and straightforward. With that being said, one of the questions that I asked them, which was a very simple question, but yet it was very powerful, was, do you believe that you are a man? Period. Have you truly stepped into manhood? Yes or no? And allow them to answer that question in affirmative. You have some young men who will want to dance around that and try to create circumstances, situations, excuses, and that's not the question. That's not how you answer the question. The question that needs to be answered directly. Do you believe that you're a man? Do you believe that you've stepped into full manhood to consider yourself to be a man? Period. And, you know, some of them said, yeah, I do. But it was shocking, and the magic is in it when you get the ones who say no. And they're well over 21. That's the powerful piece. And then to get them to analyze their answer and why they gave the answer under which they gave. Because when they give their answers, they will begin to define for you what they think a man is. So then you get into the real crux of their thought process and their value system or what have you. And then you can speak into that. And I found that to be, you know, extremely powerful. And then more importantly is the takeaways, you know, for those of them who said that, no, I don't consider myself to be a man. The beauty of it is that you've put them in a position where they have to do some self-examination and to analyze themselves. And the beauty in it is for the ones who did say no, who are well over 21, getting them to understand that they've operated in the great aspect of humility and that there's such a reward that's coming behind that. Whereas other guys, some of them who, maybe a few who said yes, knowing that they're not, it reveals some of the pride that they were operating in So you have all of these dynamics in the room that you can deal with and that you can mentor through, and then be able to give them assignments for the next time that you meet them and talk to them, And so for the ones who said, no, I don't think I'm a man yet, then the assignment is, okay, then you need to go and you need to find two things that is holding you back from stepping into being a man. So it's so just to give you some context around that, that's one of the things that we've been dealing with.
That is such a good conversation. So
very, very, very interesting.
Yeah, lets you get into their mindset of just
Absolutely.
I mean, I encourage any mentor to ask your kid that question.
Yes.
So cool.
Very powerful question.
And I feel like God really believes in your message, Korey Cross Dean, man up. I mean, that's a message for mentors. It's a message for kids. For us, I think God's standard of what it means to be a man is high, and that's a high calling, and we'll always be reaching for it, but it's worth it. It's worth it. And so really thank you so much for being willing to call people up into that, because I know it calls you to a higher standard. And I think that's the call of a mentor, is to be willing to be called to that higher standard, to call people up into manhood. So thank you so much for your time. It was awesome getting to know you. How can people connect with you after they listen to this?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, they can go to our website, and read about us and our programs that we have to offer. I mean, there's a plethora of things there that they can just kind of engage in, whether it's, videos and film, or, just reading articles, or just connecting in different ways to contact us or volunteer. So our website is themanupclub.org, or they can, if they want to get in touch with me, they could email me at info@themanupclub.org, or they can call us at 612-642-1929.
It's awesome. Korey Cross Dean. And what song of yours should we put in our show notes? Is there a song? I know you want me to put Tytist and CELENA up there.
Yeah. Let me think, man. There's so many songs that we have. Let me see what I got out. Well, it depends on what you're into. So, because I run two different lanes.
Okay.
So I have a lane where I still, do hip hop music and create that content, but then I've stepped into this other realm where I do more of a mature sound, which is more of like, if you take soul music that we all like, your Al Greens and your Otis Reddings and Smokey Robinson and Frankie Beverly and Mays and Earth, Wind and Fire, that feel, that style. I've taken that style and I've incorporated it into gospel music. So I have an album out called Gospel According to Soul.
I saw that. That's your most recent one.
That's my most recent. So I wanted to do something different to offer that. And I think there's a song. There's so many songs on there. I'm trying to think of one that really, The Good Life.
The Good Life. Okay.
The Good Life. There's a video out. It's called The Good Life. And I think that's a song right now that would really resonate with people and what we're dealing with and what we're going through. Because I think sometimes, even in the midst of turmoil, tragedy, despair, or feeling depressed, and if you're pessimistic or what have you, and things look dark, I think there's still, I think the beauty is in how you deal in that moment. And so the Good Life is a way to really put all of those things on the peripheral, where you can internally build yourself up and understand that regardless of what's going on, if you're still breathing, that's an opportunity for you to still have and celebrate the goodness of life.
Yeah.
So that's that piece. And then if you're a hip hop head and you want to just, deal in rap, I would probably suggest a song that I've done with me and my children. All three of us are on it, and it's called Reset. And there's a video behind that. Yeah.
Okay. So good, man. Looking forward to posting those on the page when this podcast releases. So thank you so much for your time, man. Looking forward to connecting more in the future with the rest of the mentoring orgs in the Learning Lab. So.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out to us, and I hope we can continue to build a great relationship.
Yeah, you got to teach us how to deal with cold weather here in Dallas. Y'all been living this your whole life, and
it's quite different.
We're suffering, man. We need that good life. So.
Feel you.